We are excited to introduce Mr. Howard Romack and his reptile friends today. Mr. Romack is the co-author of In Your Backyard, a family guide to exploring the outdoors, and is well known in the area for both his knowledge of science and his conservation efforts. Since retiring from full-time teaching at Cambridge Central School, Mr. Romack can often be found introducing a new generation of children to insects, reptiles, and more at local schools and libraries.
As a matter of fact, Mr. Harrington, Mr. Andrews, Miss Buckley, Mrs. Buckley, not Miss Buckley anymore.
Mrs. English.
It's Mrs. English. All of them were my former students. Wow, that's a long time ago. But it's not as long ago as this creature lived right here.
What is that creature?
This animal looks like a crayfish. It lived in ancient seas 500 million years ago.
What is it?
That's a long time. This animal is called a eurypterid, and it exists only in fossils anymore. This fossil rock, between 400 and 500 million years. Now, as life began to improve itself a little bit over the years, then we began to run into things that you know as dinosaurs.
Dinosaur.
Now, dinosaurs were huge. I don't have a dinosaur, but a lot of museums have them. And dinosaurs also come from ancient stone, rocks. Their bodies were preserved over the years in soft rocks. Dinosaurs appeared on our planet, on this strange rock that we live on, about 268 million years ago, which is a lot more recent than this eurypterid. And they lasted until about 220 million years. Now that sounds to you like a very short period of time. And in fact, it really was in terms of dinosaur life. And then a couple of things happened. Scientists are not actually convinced of which one it was or whether it was both of them. But one, the most common theory, which is an idea, not proven, is that a giant meteorite, you know what a meteorite is?
Yeah.
It's a big hunk of metal. It was as big as Mount Everest. And when it came through space and it hit the Earth, a huge cloud of dust, pulverized rock, went up into the atmosphere and it blocked out the sun to make the Earth very cool. Now, the dinosaurs, we think, were very closely related to snakes and lizards, which we're going to see in a few minutes. But these animals could not take cold weather. And besides that, the plants that they fed on and the other animals that they fed on were extinguished. They went extinct. Now the other theory that happened is that a giant, and I mean giant, volcano erupted in what is now India. Some 600 miles of volcanic activity. And it spewed out into the air all of this dust and debris, and it came down and it blocked out the sun, and that, along with the meteorite striking the Earth, are probably the two factors that caused the dinosaurs to die out. Now, why didn't all of the animals die? Well, there are reasons for that. There were some animals that could lay eggs, like lizards and some snakes and all turtles.
And some dragons.
There are some that lived underneath the ground where they were not affected by these two big factors that I told you about. And they were the ancestors of the creatures that we have on Earth today. And the creatures that we have on our planet right now are in serious trouble. They're in big trouble because of something that's happening by a combination of forces. Number one is human activity. The burning of fossil fuels. Now, fossil fuels are things like oil, coal, natural gas. And where they come from are ancient deposits of fossilized plants. And those plants have a lot of carbon in them. So when you burn these kinds of fossil fuels, a lot of that carbon goes up in the atmosphere and it forms a layer around the Earth, just underneath a layer that we call the ozone layer, and that also blocks out sunlight. So our Earth is changing in climate. We have big swings in temperature. We have big swings in floods. You read about it all the time or see it on television. Now today, we have a lot of animals that lack one of these. What is this? You have one. What is it? Yeah. Over there. A what? Say it out loud, I can't hear you.
A bone.
They're bones, yeah, but this is very special. What kind of bone is this? Guy with a vertebral column, vertebrae. These are individual bones that make this column enable you and creatures that are related to you stand up straight. These creatures here are called invertebrates. They depend on having a tough skeleton around the outside. And this is why these creatures, called arthropods, things like insects, scorpions, grasshoppers, giant centipedes, millipedes, bees and wasps, are all invertebrates. Now, that makes them have a really tough time surviving because there's a certain amount of effort that it takes an insect or other arthropod to bend its legs and joints. There's a certain amount of pressure that a muscle can put on the exoskeleton. Otherwise, if the muscles are too big, it'll rip the animal apart. Whereas in you folks, you have strong bones to which your muscles are attached, and they help you pull your body from place to place. Now, this vertebral column also contains something that you've got to be very careful of. Do you see that hole running down the middle?
Yeah.
This is where your spinal cord goes. It starts at the base of your brain and it goes all the way down to your tailbone back here.
I don't even have a tail.
Yes, no, it means it's the lowest bone in your body above your legs. Okay? Oh. Well, anyway, if you look along this vertebral column, you'll see little holes coming out the sides. This is where nerves come out, and they go into all parts of your body. This is how you feel, how you smell, how you feel pain, how you feel taste. But creatures like this, the invertebrates, don't have those nerves. They depend on feeling through their feet, through their antenna, through tiny organs on their tummies, but they'll never get as big as you are because they don't have the nervous system that you do. Now, in nature, around here, and in the world, there are 5 different groups, we call these classes, of animals. All 5 of these classes have a vertebral column, all 5. The first one, and I'm going to have you name this particular class, have slimy skin, they have scales, and they breathe by gills. What are they? Yeah.
Turtles.
No?
Snakes.
Snakes? Nope. Yep. Say it out loud.
Fish.
Fish is correct, yeah. The fish live in water. And they have to live in water because their eggs are like jelly. And if they come out on the land and lay their eggs on land, they're going to dry out. They also have gills to breathe. They can't use gills on land, they would dry out. So the fish are confined to water. They're confined. They have to stay there. The next group has slimy skin. They don't have any claws on their feet. They have no scales. They start out living in the water. They lay jelly-like eggs just like a fish, but during their life, they change. Their bodies change. They get an extra heart chamber to breathe air. They lose their gills. They can walk around on land, although they need to live in a very moist place. What is this class of vertebrates? Yeah, right here.
Frogs.
Well, that's not a class, but you're right. That's one of them. What's the other? What's the class? What?
A toad.
A toad is also one of these. What's the other one? In the back. No, not lizards. They belong to the next one. What looks like a lizard? What looks kind of like a lizard? You've all seen them. Yeah. What are they? No. Back there in the red shirt. Anybody? Yeah.
Said newts.
Go ahead. Just answer.
Amphibians.
They are the amphibians. The word amphibian means part life on water, part life on land. And that's a good clue because they're kind of like a halfway animal that lives part of its life in water, part of its life on land. And that's a really important jump, but it's not complete yet. The next group of animals, the one that you asked me to talk about today, are those that have dry skin, they have scales, they have claws on their feet, and every one of them lay eggs. Every one. What are they?
Cats.
What?
Cats.
Cats?
Yeah.
No, not cats.
Lizards.
Lizards is one. I want to know the class to which they belong. Back there, pink shirt. What?
Snakes.
What did you say?
Snakes.
Snakes is correct, yeah. By the way, don't let these crawl off the table, will you please?
I will.
Okay, back there, gray shirt.
Reptiles.
The reptiles, class number 3, the reptiles. The big jump that the reptiles have is a complete jump onto the land. Now, I don't mean jump physically. It means that their bodies can exist on land, totally. Because the reptiles may have the ability to lay eggs. And those eggs are dug, put in holes, and then they are heated by the warmth of the sun in order to hatch. But there are some snakes, like garter snakes around here, which you've all seen, that have their babies born alive. Now, that's a big advantage, isn't it? It allows those animals not to have to lay an egg in a hole, but they can give birth to their babies alive. I'll tell you an interesting story. When I was teaching at Cambridge, I was up on the second floor of the building. Ms. English knows exactly where I was. And I had a phone call from the secretaries in the school. And the secretary said, "Howard, can you come down to the office? There's a phone call for you." So at the end of my class, I only had about 5 minutes. I went down and got her phone call. And she said, "Can you come up to my lake?" She lived up at Scott's Lake, which isn't very far from here. And she says, "I've got a huge snake in my backyard. Can you come up and look at it and tell me if it's poisonous?" By the way, I knew right off the bat it couldn't be anything poisonous because we have none here. We don't have poison snakes around here.
Those water snakes.
What?
Water snakes.
No, water snakes are not poisonous. They're not poisonous. They're very mean, but they're not poisonous. So I grabbed a couple of my students who were in the class. They were high school kids. And I said, "Let's go up and see what this lady has in her backyard." So we went down, jumped in the truck, and I put one of these. This is one of the bags that I use to carry reptiles around. They don't like being in here, but for the length of time that I do a program for kids, they're perfectly happy. And when I get home, they go in big tanks in my cellar. Now, when we got up there, the lady told us, "Well, it's down by the water." And I saw that she had a big retaining wall to keep the waves from washing her yard away. So I went down with the kids and we looked along this big stone wall that she had put down there. And I only saw a little garter snake about that big, and I said to the kids, that can't be what she's talking about. So we were about ready to leave, and I said, well, let me look at one more thing. In the middle of that big rock pile that she had piled along the shore, there was a big piece of slate about as long as this table and about that thick. So I said, I want to see what's under that slate. Well, we obviously couldn't move it. It's just too big. So I climbed up on the wall and I looked underneath, and there I saw the biggest water snake I have ever seen. It was at least 4.5 feet long. It was that big around, and I knew what would happen. If I put my hand under there, I was going to get bitten. So I told the kids, I said, do you want to see this? So they got up on the wall, they looked under there. I thought for sure the snake, they're very wary, and usually they go in the water. So I said, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to reach under there and grab that big snake, and I'm going to pull it off from under the rock, and I'm going to throw it up on the shore, and you guys pin it down with a canoe paddle. There was a couple canoe paddles on the yard. So I reached under there and grabbed that snake, and it bit me about 3 times. But I hung on. I'm tough. So anyway, I grabbed this big snake. I couldn't even get my hand around it. It was that big. And I pulled it off from under that rock, and I flipped it up on the yard. And the kids pinned it down. Didn't hurt it. They just pinned it down. And I went to the truck and got a snake bag, and we stuck that big old snake in that bag. Now, I had a feeling about what this snake was about to do. So we took it back to my classroom, and in the back of the room, I had some big fish tanks, which were dry. So we put a layer of newspaper, which is the best way to keep snakes dry, and a nice bowl of water. We put a screen cover on the top, and we piled piles of books on both ends, because I didn't want the same thing happen with that snake as did the year before. We had an English teacher in my room, and the kids brought in some garter snakes, and we put them in a fish tank. I didn't think they could get out, but they did. And one of those snakes went through a heatilator, and it went down the wall, and as Mrs. Sherman was teaching, the snake came out right in front of her, wiggled its tongue, and I thought for sure we were going to have an earthquake in there when she tried to get out of that classroom. So anyway, we didn't want that big water snake to get out. So we piled books on there, and we left for the night. And wouldn't you know,
It got out.
we came in the next morning, there wasn't one water snake, but there were 39 babies. She had given birth overnight, alive. So we let the kids watch them for a while, and we put them all in a big bag. We took them up to Scotts Lake, and we let them all go. And now the lady probably has 30 or 40 in her stone wall. But don't tell her, okay? Make sure you don't tell her. Now, snakes are very interesting creatures, and we'll talk more about it in a few minutes. The next group have a shell on the back. Looks like this.
I know.
Now, what is this? Young man, what there?
A turtle.
It is a turtle. Good for you. But do you think turtles, as they grow, can they get out of their shell?
No.
Yes.
They can?
Yeah.
No, they can't. Good answer, though. Because a lot of kids think, and a lot of adults do too, is that as turtles grow bigger, they simply climb out of their shell, grow a bigger shell, but that's not true. This shell is made of bone. And this shell also, if you look at the inside carefully, if you look at the inside of this shell, you'll see that it has a backbone, just like you do. This backbone runs up into the base of the skull, just like yours, and then down into the tail. And when you find a big turtle crawling across the road, don't handle it. Don't get near it, because snapping turtles have very, very long necks. And they can snap out lightning speed. And if they get your finger, they're not going to let go.
I know.
And your first reaction is to pull. And when you pull, you're going to tear your finger to ribbons. So don't get near them. The ones you see in the spring are almost always females. And they're coming out of the ponds to find a good place to dig a hole. They lay their eggs in the hole, cover them up, then they go back into the pond. They know exactly where that pond is, and part of that is allowed to them to find that pond by the odor of the water. A lot of them crawl across the road in the spring and get hit by cars. I don't like to see that happen. It's terrible. So if you're driving around with your parents and you see a turtle in the road, don't get out and handle it yourself. But if you have a parent, if it's a big one like this, sometimes people will pick them up by the tail. Now that's not a good idea, because a big one like this one weighed 35 pounds. But all of the pressure from the tail separates these vertebrae and it will kill them. If it's a little snapping turtle, then it's not so apt to happen. Now, because this is a reptile, these objects on the outside are scales. And as the bones grow inside, these are ribs, they grow longer, and the turtle never comes out of the shell. Now, many turtles cannot grow very fast, but I had a turtle that I gave to a private zoo that had a head on it this big. This one is one that I would have to be very careful of, because it could take off your whole hand. This one now is protected by law down south. This is the alligator snapping turtle. Mine weighed 135 pounds. And he got so big that I used to take it around to show kids in schools. But after a while, it took two of us in a big trunk to take him around. And he got so large, I finally gave him to a private zoo. And Old Crunch, that was his name, is doing very well, living now in a big tank with 5 6-foot alligators. And they don't bother each other, and they all eat fish, which is a good thing for alligator snappers. Now, alligator snappers live down south. They don't live around here. This one here is a common snapper. This one lives in Louisiana, East Texas, and parts of Florida. But they're becoming very rare. And the reason they're becoming rare is because people ate them for soup. And now they're protected by law in almost all of the states in which they find. Now, here are a couple of other turtles. And you should know what these are, because these are ones you're liable to see when you're traveling around. I'm not going to open them up. I'm going to take them out. And I want you to see this guy, because he looks kind of like this one. But this one is growing into that one. It's going to take him 50 years to get that big. But this one is 2 years old. I picked up this one crawling across the road, and I was afraid it was going to get hit by a car. So I brought it home, and in 1 year, it grew this big. Now this is a baby common snapping turtle. He's 2 years old. He has not begun to snap yet, but in 1 more year, when he gets to be about 5 inches long, he's going to take up snapping. Now, turtles don't have any teeth, but what they do is they grab a hold of something, and then they use their claws to tear off a big hump and then swallow it whole. A turtle, like a snapping turtle, does not eat ducks. And no matter what anybody says, they don't. But if you've got bullfrogs in your pond, you better blame them, because bullfrogs, which are amphibians, will cram anything into their mouth that they can get in there. They're amazing animals, but they're an amphibian. Now this little snapping turtle is a nice little guy, but he's got sharp claws and a very long neck. And maybe he'll stick his neck out while I'm holding him. No, he's not going to, but later, if you want to take a look at it up close, you can. Now, another turtle that we have around here that's becoming very rare.
Rare.
Very rare, and that means very, very hard to find.
Is it a painted turtle?
What's that?
Is it a painted turtle?
No, painted turtles are probably our most common turtle.
Because I have 2 of them at home.
Why do you see painted turtles lined up on a log in the summertime? Why are they doing that? Young lady in the back?
Aren't they trying
Say it up loud.
Aren't they trying to find a spot to lay eggs?
What'd you say?
To lay eggs. It's not to lay eggs.
No, they come ashore to lay eggs just like a snapping turtle. Why are they? Let me ask you a question. Are turtles warm-blooded or cold-blooded?
Cold-blooded.
They are cold-blooded. I figure you all know that. I want you to put your hand on your table. Just place it on the table. Now I want you to place your hand on your neck. What's the difference between the temperatures?
The desk is colder than your neck.
The desk is cold, your neck is warm. And that's like it is with a turtle. If a turtle is living in a pond and the water temperature is cool and his body temperature or her body temperature gets cool, they've got to come up and sit on a log and let the sun beat down on them to make sure that body temperature gets warm. Then they can dive in the water, they can hunt the insect nymphs, other small minnows and things, and then come back and sun themselves. Okay? New York State has made a new law where it's not allowed to catch and keep any reptiles or amphibians. Now, to me, that's probably a good idea for the rare ones, like this one. But I think it's perfectly fine. I'm only saying this. If you want to catch a turtle and keep it for a day or two just to watch it, then let it go. I don't think anybody's going to come looking for you.
But the reason why
Now, you always want to wash your hands if you handle a turtle, because they can have germs on their shell, and that's a good idea to wash your hands. And that's one of the reasons why I'm not letting you handle these turtles. Here is a beautiful turtle. This is as large as it gets. It has a checkerboard pattern on the bottom. The only turtle that has that checkerboard. It has nice orange skin. He's got a black head. He's very tame. But actually, I say that this is him, but actually it's a her. Now, how do I tell a her turtle from a he turtle? Well, here's how you do. Do you ask it, what are you? No, they can't tell you that. But if you look at the bottom, if you look at the bottom and it's flat across the bottom, that's the mama turtle. If it has a little concave dent all the way down on the bottom, that's the male. That helps them mate, because with this big shell, that's pretty hard to do, for them to do. And turtles, no, it's not a snapping turtle. This, by the way, is a wood turtle. And wood turtles are land turtles. And they're becoming very rare because they're using a lot of chemicals in our environment. A lot of these turtles get run over by roads because we put a lot of roads in that crisscross our area. So if you see one of these, they're not going to bite you. And you can pick one up, but just make sure that you wash your hands when you're done. Now this one, I'm going to tell you, has a really nice scientific name. It's called Clemys insculpta, meaning carved on. And this beautiful shell looks like it's carved out of wood. And that's where it gets its name, the wood turtle. The interesting thing about this wood turtle is that it loves earthworms. And if it's traveling along the banks of a stream on the land and it wants an earthworm, it's been observed that this turtle can stick out its front legs, pick up its shell a little bit, and go thump on the ground. And that vibration causes the wood turtle to get its meal, which are earthworms. Now it loves other things. I feed mine a variety of things and keeps them healthy. I never give them hamburger. I give them a little fresh vegetables, fresh chopped strawberries, fresh chopped bananas, fresh chopped chicken, fresh chopped greens. Now that seems like a lot of work, and it is. Because if you're keeping a turtle at home and you get tired of keeping it, the first thing you might do is go in the refrigerator, get a wad of hamburger and throw it in the cage. That's when you get tired of it. Now it's time to let it go, because Mama is going to see that, and your mother is going to say, go get that turtle out of here. It smells bad, and it will. But it's also going to kill the turtle if you keep feeding it hamburger. Not good for it. You've got to mix those vegetables up a little bit. Now, the last class of vertebrates, actually the last group within the class reptiles, are these. Where did this come from? Where did it come from? Back in the back with the green and white shirt. It came from a snake. If I hold this snake up by the tail and hold the end down on the table, why is the actual snake about a foot shorter than the skin? Does anybody know? How about it? This black sweater, yeah. What happens? You're gonna be able to see that in one of the snakes, because if you look at the skin of a snake, it is covered by scales. But in between each scale, there's a little bit of skin. Now when a snake gets ready to shed its skin, its eyes turn blue. And that means like a milky blue color. And that means that the snake is producing a little bit of fluid just underneath its scales. Then, when the eye clears up, it's nice and clear, the snake rubs its nose around objects in the environment, rocks and sticks, and it begins peeling off that skin. It's like you pulling off a glove. And it crawls right out of the old skin. This skin is inside out. It's long because the skin has dried as the scales have stretched as it comes off of the snake.
Like a water snake.
Okay? So that's what this is. Now, if you have an old barn around your property and you see a snake skin, then that's what happened. You probably have a snake that can climb. It's up on a rafter. If you just find one along the ground, it's probably a garter snake. And you can tell if you look carefully because the pattern is still on the old skin. Now, snakes, make sure I get the right one. Snakes are very cool. I don't suggest that you keep snakes for very long, because the ones you have around here, they all bite when you first catch one. They all bite. They're not poisonous, but they can bite, and they can draw blood. Even garter snakes. So it's fun to watch them, but not a good idea to handle it. Now this particular snake was given to me by one of the students in my class back in the year 1998. This little girl had this snake as a pet, and I've had it ever since. Her name is Oscar.
Oscar?
Oscar the snake.
I have a cat named Oscar.
And Oscar is really very beautiful. Now, Oscar eats nothing but mice and rats. That's kind of a nasty thing to feed him if you're keeping a snake, but that's what snakes do. And it can kill the food by wrapping around it. This is called constriction. This snake is from Florida. It's very rare. This is the Fakahatchee king snake. And these guys, this one is very tame, stick their tongues out, not to sting anybody, but to smell. That's what they do. They smell with their tongues. Now, when the snake has killed a mouse, it lets go of the mouse and it uses its tongue to taste all over that mouse until it finds the nose. Then, what's amazing is that it can undo its jaws. Your jaws are sealed right here, but the snake has a band of muscle that allows these two bones to separate. After all, it has no hands. And each one of those lower jaws can grab a hold, The upper jaw grabs a hold, then they shift some more, and they swallow their food whole. Now that's a very nice adaptation for someone like this who has no hands. So they can't cut up their food. They've got to eat it whole. But guess what? One of these snakes, when it eats something the size of a rat, and they can, doesn't have to eat again for 4 months or 5 months. And that's a very special adaptation. You'd go hungry if you went for a month without eating. You'd get very skinny. You'd look like a snake. But you can't do that. And one of the reasons you can't is because these guys are cold-blooded and they don't need the energy that you do. But to keep your bodies warm, you need to have a lot of food which you burn in your body. That's burn is loosely used. I'm sure Ms. English can tell you what that means, or either of your teachers, all of them. And the snake doesn't have to eat very much because it takes so long to digest its food. Now, here's the last snake that I'll show you. Then I think maybe a few of you might. Have you got time? Questions? No?
10 minutes? Yeah, we have
10 minutes? Okay. Now I'd like Ms. English to come up here with me. You guys are using that video camera. You make sure that you take pictures.
What do you think of it?
Ms. English says she loves snakes. Oh, she loves them. Look at she's acting for the camera now. I know.
I love all kind of snakes.
What am I going to see?
Keep that back, please.
Oh, yeah.
I'm trying to keep it down for these. There you are. Now, are snakes slimy? Who thinks they're slimy? Come on, somebody must. You think they're slimy? You think they're slimy? Come up here, young lady. I'd like you to feel that snake and tell everybody, grab it with your fingers. Is that slimy or is it just smooth? Is it smooth or slimy?
Say it nice and loud.
Touch it and see if you got anything. You got any water on your hands? No, so it's dry, right? No, this is a gopher snake from out west.
Gopher snake from
Gopher snake.
West.
I think you just tasted.
Okay, who else would like to feel one?
I do.
Let me walk around a little bit.
Stay sitting, Mr. Romack will come
Watch the
around.
cord. Watch the cord. Now, anybody who doesn't want to doesn't have to. I'm not shoving this down your throat. I just thought it might be fun for some of you who have not ever felt a snake before.
What's that?
I'd like to feel one.
Hey guys, just be patient. Mr. Romack will come around. Just make sure your coats and stuff are out of the way so he doesn't trip and make a clear path for him.